Good morning. God bless you. Welcome. God bless all of you. Thank you for tuning in live on Facebook and YouTube. I want to thank our superintendent, Sister Brooks, our media ministry team headed by Reverend Henderson and Sister Fletcher, and thank our trustees at Whitestone Baptist Church for sponsoring this presentation of our lesson, the last one for the fall quarter, for this week, November 27th, lesson number 128, and the 13th one and the final one for the fall quarter. The Bible text for this week is Leviticus chapter 25, the first 12 verses. The theme for Leviticus is holiness. The theme for the month of November is obedience in society, how we obey God in the midst of our living on the earth. The theme process, learning how to honor God. The golden text in our lesson text is verse 10. And it reads, proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a jubilee unto you, and ye shall return every man unto his possession, and ye shall return every man unto his family. Our chief commentator, Don Anderson, explained this best on page 176 of the Adult Expositor. He said, during the Jubilee year, however, all property purchased in the past 49 years, within that context and that part of history, was to be returned to its original owners, in exception concerning houses inside walled cities is noted in verses 29 and 30 of that same chapter 25. This provision of the Jubilee year, year 50, recognized the Lord's ownership of the land and prevented wealthier Israelites from exploiting or oppressing their poor fellow citizens. See verses 14 and then verse 17. The lesson is divided into two sections. Section 1, remember the Sabbath year with joy, verses 1 through 7. And then verses 1 and 2 deals with the command from God for the Sabbath year. And he tells us what will happen during the 6 years of work, verse 3, and the 7th year of rest, verses 4 and 5, and food in the 7th year, how it will be available, although you did not plant the crops, verses 6 and 7. Section 2, with joy, verses 8 through 12, and verse 8 is the calculating of the Jubilee year, verse 9, announcing the Jubilee year, year 50, that is. Restoration during the Jubilee year, year 50, verse 10, and verses 11 and 12, agriculture during the Jubilee year, farming and producing and harvesting in the year of the Jubilee year. How was that to take place? Anderson made 6 key points on page 173 of our Adult Expositor. Number 1, the Bible is full of praises to God and urging to praise God. The Bible gives us examples of people praising God, and the Bible gives us instructions on why it is important to praise God always. Number 2, the Old Testament saints had another way of praising God by observing special holy occasions, whether for days, weeks, months, or even years. Like, say, this is an even year, 2022. The next even year would be 2024. Number 3, we are urged in this age, in this 21st century, to praise God with others and alone in our personal lives, meaning we ought to praise God on Sunday, or whenever we worship together, we ought to praise God daily, all through the day. Number 4, the Sabbath regulations meant for people to work 6 days and rest and worship on the 7th day. Number 5, the Sabbath day was the 7th year in a 7-year cycle. And number 6, or the 6th point, all of this was based on the Lord's creation week, in which he worked 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested, or he reclined from working. See Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. Keywords defined: exhortation, E-X-H-O-R-T-A-T-I-O-N. We see it's warning or urging. Meat, we see the word meat. Meat of my word means food, nutrition, nourishment, essential, substance. Liberty, we hear about liberty all the time. It means freedom, and with that freedom comes rights and privileges. Remember, to recall or to reflect. Proclaim, we see that in verse 10. Advertise, to make known to all, to everybody. To get on the soapbox. Just never stop talking about God's goodness, never stop talking about Christ's resurrection and what he did for us at Calvary on the cross. Obedience means to comply with orders or instruction. And I mentioned Jubilee is the 50th year, year 50. Atonement, in this context, death of Jesus on the cross to save us from sin. Celebration, we know that the subject of the lesson is, I don't think I gave you the subject. The subject is obedience in celebration. Obedience in celebration. That's the subject. And it's taken from Leviticus chapter 25, the first 12 verses. So obedience in celebration is the subject of our lesson for this week. I didn't give you that. But celebration is a time of special rejoicing for what has been achieved of humanity by God. Joy, great happiness, pleasure. Reap, to gather crops or to harvest. Harvest means to collect or gather produce, fruits and vegetables, what have you. Prune, P-R-U-N-E, we hear pruning, to cut short, to trim the bushes, the vineyards, or the vines in the vineyard. Sabbath, 7th day of the week, to worship and rest. I've covered that already. Sow, S-O-W, to plant. Fallow, F-A-L-L-O-W, means when the land is inactive or unused. After year 6, the land was not to be used. It was to be fallow for year 7. And if it was in the cycle of the 50th year, like 7 times 7, 7 years at 7 years, then that year, the 50th year, would be, the ground would be fallow. Restoration, well, agriculture, farming or crop producing. Restoration means to bring back to life or to bring back to full use. Command, to give out orders or instructions. Inhabitant, you see that in the scriptures. In verse 10, now, golden text. Residence, dweller, or within a certain vicinity, certain area. 10 questions on page 177 with answers. Number 1, how did Israel's agricultural cycle reflect the pattern of the work week and Sabbath day? Well, based on the Sabbath day cycle established at creation, the Lord wanted his people to plant their fields, prune their vineyards, and take in the produce for 6 years. Do it for 6 years. Page 174. Number 2, what were the Israelites to do every 7 years? The Israelites were to observe a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath unto the Lord. In other words, rest and worship God. Rest the land and worship God. Page 174. Number 3, what were the Israelites to do with the produce that grew on its own every 7th year? If the produce grew on its own during the 7th year, what were they to do? Well, they were not to harvest it or store it away, but it was available to be eaten as needed by everybody in the community. Page 174. It would be enough for everybody. Number 4, why were they to observe the Sabbath year, year 50? It was a year set apart to the Lord. The Sabbath year undoubtedly was a reminder to the Israelites to take God's Sabbath cycles seriously and to trust him for food in the year that they did not plant crops. Page 174. Number 5, what did God promise to do in the 6th year, year 6? He promised abundance in obedience to his instruction. If you obeyed him and followed his instructions, followed this command, then you would have more than enough. That's what abundance means. The crop of the 6th year would be so abundant that it would be sufficient, enough for that year and for the next 2 years, pages 174 and 175. Number 6, what relationship did God have to the land and his people? What relationship did God have with the land and its people? Well, God considered the land of Israel and to be his land, and his people were, in essence, tenants living on his land. See verse 23, page 175. Number 7, when was the Jubilee year to take place? Well, at the end of the 7 cycles, the number of perfection, 7-year cycle of the Sabbath year, 49 years, the people were to set aside the entire year, the 50th year, as the Jubilee year, page 175. Number 8, in what way was the Jubilee year, year 50, a year of liberty? Well, it's best answered this way. This liberty encompassed 2 areas of the people's lives: restoring family property, giving it back, and restoring the family itself, just giving the family a time to rejuvenate, to refurbish its. Number 9, how were the Sabbath year and the Jubilee year to be occasions for joy? Well, the best answer is the people would be joyful as they remembered God's provisions for them, even when they had not planted, or they did not plant their crops. They would be joyful as land that had been sold was returned to the owners, so that owners would not be impoverished. Nobody would suffer if you just followed God's instructions in this context. They would be joyful as hired servants who were returned to their families and did not continue in servitude. Pages 176 and 177. The final question, number 10. What are some practical values of these 2 events? The Sabbath year and the Jubilee year. There are 4 of them. First, both celebrations remind us of the 7-year cycle of work and rest the Lord intended. Second, see, God intends for us to rest, relax, refresh ourselves, and worship him. Second, both celebrations remind us of the Lord's provisions for our needs. We'll always be thankful. We have to be thankful all through the day, every day, all through the year, as long as we live. Third, both celebrations, and especially the Jubilee year, year 50, remind us of the need to care for fellow believers. We're supposed to look out for each other. Fourth, both celebrations remind us that every day events should be holy events for us. Page 177. Notes and quotes for our, you might say, spiritual meditation. Dr. Dowd, one of our other commentators, said on page 178, the year of Jubilee was grounded in the truth that the Israelites were God's chosen people, and the land was the land promised to Abraham. The goal of this lesson text is threefold. three major aims, three goals for this lesson. First, we are to understand the instructions and regulations of the year of Jubilee. Second, we are to realize it is the Lord's way of life for us to rejoice in his possession and provision. See, whatever we have, I think I mentioned this on Sunday, whatever we have, however much we have, it still belongs to God, because when we die, it'll be left right here. Third, we are to remember daily that Christ has freed us. Jesus Christ has freed us from bondage and servitude to this world. Nothing should dominate us in this world. I think I wrote something wrong down. Let me check that while I'm looking at it to be sure. On page 180, Dr. Grant, that should be Grant, on page 7 of the lesson lecture, Dr. Grant, G-R-A-N-T, said on page 180, we show appreciation to God, you and me, you and I, we show appreciation to God by being good stewards over what we have. Whatever we have, we take care of it. We take care of people that we're assigned to work with, assigned to lead. We take care of the cars we have. We take care of the children we have. We take care of the parents. We take care of the property we live on. We take care of the job that we have. We take care of the money that we receive. We take care of the food. We show appreciation to God by being good stewards over whatever we have. See verses 6, 7, 8, and 9, and 10. Hamburg added, sinful man, sinful people like us, would never have come up with God's program of a merciful Jubilee year. It goes against the grain of what we call good business sense. Page 180. Under the children's corner. Under the children's corner, and the children we talk about play between 2, 2.5, up to 7.5 to 8, in particular, under normal circumstances. Under the children's corner on page 185, Dahlquist made 3 key points in regard to helping children understand God's ways. And whatever the children need to understand, we as adults need to understand it. First, children grasp quickly the meaning of mind. It doesn't take them long to understand what's mine. Very quick. Like adults, children have a hard time seeing that God owns everything. I left God out. God owns everything. Children have a hard time seeing that God owns everything. Third, God owns everything, including us. Yes, you and me. The thing about it is, and the final word I want to say, the whole idea behind this lesson text is God gives specific instructions on how to live on his earth in his world. And if we comply with it, we'll never want or need anything. He will indeed be the Lord. And we can say, he is my shepherd, and I shall not want. God bless you, and thank you for tuning in on YouTube and Facebook. And I hope you would join us in worship later. God bless you. Thank you.